Well, it's certainly the end of an era. Sony has announced that they're going to go all digital with their games and they're not going to be making any physical copies of games anymore. We all can see this coming from a mile away ever since everything started going digital. It's just more convenient for a lot of people. As a matter of fact, I went digital. I stopped buying physical games a long time ago, since probably the PlayStation 4 or maybe the PlayStation 3. But so I'm partially to blame for it, and it never really hit me what physical media means. I was never big on physical when it came to games. I just didn't hold games in that kind of regard. But it made me dig deep into my closet at all the games I have collected over the years. I'm not a game collector. These are all personal um, that I've had. For example, my Nintendo 64 that I got for Christmas when I was a teenager. My first console was actually the Super Nintendo. When I was a kid, I actually received this right here, the Super Nintendo. This is my original Super Nintendo. I got as a kid, and I still have the games. And as a matter of fact, I still have the um, the instruction manuals to these games, right? And looking at this, it started to dawn on me why these things are important. They're important to me personally, but they're not important to me in terms of how I think of uh, new games. Personally, physical matters to me when it comes to these games because this existed when I was a kid and when I was a teenager growing up. These are the games I grew up with. For example, one of my favorite games for the Super Nintendo is Donkey Kong Country. This game was the first game that I played as a kid that really blew me away. Um, and I have the instruction manual here. See, games used to come in the box. I didn't. The box got thrown away, but this is missing the cover of the manual. But you can see the manuals had pictures and artwork, and it gave the experience of the games a whole different experience. They had story written, like stories. You can read the story in the manual. Look how in depth these old gaming manuals used to be that came with the game, you know? And I guess the argument is you don't really need this now, right? Because, well, you have the internet. But flipping through this manual, right? It gives me, it's like a reminder of the effort that game developers used to go through. Not just in making the game, but look at this. This is insane, right? Your thirsty animal friends, and then they explain what each of these characters are. They give them a personality, a story tied to them. I mean, there was some heart to it. There was some actually love of the craft, right? You don't see this kind of dedication anymore in game making. The making of Donkey Kong Country, right? Like they had to do all this. You buy this game for the Super Nintendo, you get an instruction manual with it, and this one might have came with a poster too. I don't know. And then with my next console, for Christmas was the Super Nintendo 64, and this was my Nintendo 64. And but before I do that, let's just go over how you used to install the games, right? So you have your Super Nintendo sitting by the TV, and then you put in this little slot the cartridge like that, right? And if you want to take the cartridge out, you press the eject button right here, pops it, pull it out. And sometimes we'd actually blow in it, like because sometimes it wouldn't work, so we just blow, open this up, blow, get the dust out, put it in, use this switch to power it on, and it'll turn on. And this was a reset button, so if we wanted to reset the game, we just reset the game. Yeah, and look, and imagine this sitting by your TV with the game and the artwork of the game and the title of the game while you're playing the game. It's just a whole different vibe, right? It's just a whole different feel, and you can feel the craft, not just in playing the game, but the attention to detail and the craft. You can see that the developers really, this was like a passion for them to make this game. And the problem I see with modern day games is they become so corporate that it's not so much, you can feel, it's like, it's becoming artificial, right? There's not as much love and passion for the game like it was. You get this when the Nintendo 64 came out, this was the first time that we were introduced to real 3D worlds. And I was a teenager. And I feel so lucky that I grew up playing this game for the first time. The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. This was an important, not just game, but life experience for me growing up. Because you think, I was the age of Link, waking up, in that tree. And I grew up with Link. Because I was the exact age. And I cannot express what it was like playing this game for the first time as a teenager, growing up with Link. It was incredible. And this was in traversing a 3D world in a game after playing games on the Super Nintendo in 2D side-scrolling, and going to a 3D world for the first time there's never going to be a time where maybe the closest is going from 3D to virtual reality, to have that awe-inspiring moment that really hits you like this is a new paradigm shift in the world of gaming. And then later on with the Nintendo 64, you have a memory expansion slot here, right? And you see this red? That's the expansion pack. And I needed that expansion pack for one game in particular. And that game was this. And I actually have the instruction manual for this as well. I was able to hold on to that, but The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask. I got the Gold Edition and 3D. When you talk about care in physical media, how games used to be designed, how games used to be made, and how much attention to detail was not just put into the game itself, but in the physical disc or the physical cartridge of the game. Look at this artwork. Look at this, the color of this cartridge. Look at the 3D effect. Okay? And look what it looks like when you put it in the system. And just imagine playing this, right? This is in front of my TV, my CRTV, and I'm playing it like this. And this is the booklet. And if I go through the booklet, there's color, there's art, there's instructions. Look at the artwork. Look at the descriptions. Link gives you a description of Link. Skull Kid gives you an instruction, description of the Skull Kid, right? It shows you all the characters. It shows you a map. It, welcome to Termina. Yeah, it tells you the Zora tribe, the Goron tribe. You don't get that with modern games, right? Because everything's digital. Digital, you download the game, you play the game. You don't have this experience of actually touching a manual, touching the game itself in an actual physical form, powering it on. Check this out. I mean, it's look at this. Look at that. I mean, look, color, art, and look, you even have a back page, right? Notes in the back. The only note I wrote was the bomber's code. 5. Why did I write it so many times? Oh, because I played the game multiple times. There was different codes for different times, right? Controllers. This is another thing about Nintendo, right? Nintendo's old consoles. Okay, we got the Super Nintendo. This was the Super Nintendo controller, right? We got the game, we got the cartridge. We got the system itself, and you can see how it looks, right? It's got its own personality. It's got its own look, right? Then you go over to the Nintendo 64, and it's the same thing. Different shaped cartridge, different shaped system, different style controller. And not only were the games designed to match, the system, it was designed to specifically be played with this controller. All these buttons, the feel of the controller, the feel of the game. It's important to play it with this controller because it was designed to play with this controller. And then moving on to the next system I got was the GameCube, the Nintendo GameCube, right? And then you had this controller with the Nintendo GameCube. And you can see this is kind of where it started getting into its more, what we know as a controller today. And for the Nintendo GameCube, my favorite games were for that system. I actually, regrettably, sold a lot of my games, a lot of my Nintendo GameCube games to GameStop, regrettably. Kind of wish I didn't, but I held on to my favorites. Um, and my favorites were Resident Evil Remake. Now, I don't remember if this came with an instruction manual. Maybe this is when they stopped doing instruction manuals, but instruction manuals missing. And but you can see Nintendo, the discs were not your regular size discs. They were a small disc. And so I thought that was unique and interesting. And the game's actually in the GameCube. Um, but this is when I was like becoming more of a young adult in my later teens. So I was playing more mature games. And I got the Metal Gear Solid collection for the PlayStation 2. I actually, at this time, started getting into other consoles. That's when I started getting into PlayStation. I actually got a PlayStation 2, and I got Metal Gear Solid, the collector's edition, which comes with the trilogy. And for the GameCube, I got Twin Snakes. And this is actually a copy that I think I bought later because I actually sold the original. And this one's still in its wrapping. So I just like the game that much. I had to get it. And then, of course, going into handhelds, there's the original Nintendo Game Boy. And it's kind of in really bad shape. The screen falls soft, but yeah, these aren't things I'm planning on selling or whatever. I mean, it's just personal things I just never got rid of that I still own, and including all these instruction manuals, which, you know, Thunder Spirits is a hidden gem, or actually a good shooter, rail shooter, I guess you would call it. I have Star Fox 64 for the Super Nintendo. I know they're remaking that. They're remaking Ocarina of Time, which I'm not sure I'm really interested in. You had for the Nintendo 64, you had Cruising the World. Of course, Super Mario World for the Super Nintendo was great. And but yeah, here's Thunder Spirits. This is actually a good game. Yeah, and I also have some bad ones like Dennis the Menace. Terrible game. Yeah. But yeah, man, just looking through these old physical copies of my games, and I'm like, yeah, man, it's a shame that this era of gaming is over, right? Where you actually own the physical copy of games, because once they're all digital, you don't really own them anymore. They're just downloaded digital copies, and it's not the same, right? Cruising the World was a great racing game, but yeah, that's it. I'm just reminiscing about my past, feeling like an old man now, and it just feels like a new era. And I'll leave it on this as far as handhelds are concerned. Limited edition Majora's Mask Nintendo DS XL, 3DS XL. And yeah, Majora's Mask is my favorite game of all time. So I had to get this. And again, this was when Nintendo was still innovating, right? This was when Nintendo was still doing things different. And now with the Switch and the Switch 2, just more of the same. What a shame. Anyway, at least I was lucky enough to grow up in a time where I felt like I can actually appreciate games. Why did I start buying digital games? For the convenience? Yeah, partially. But also, ever since the PS4, ever since the Nintendo Wii, Nintendo Switch, the love and appreciation for games has kind of dwindled. And I don't feel like owning physical copies of modern games is necessary because I got no love for the new, but I still have love for the old. Because the old had heart, and the old showed that it cared.